Hey, this is Vance Yoakum, your Fiscal Ranger. You're about to look at a video of the final determination of whether Eustis is able to annex some retirement communities that are located, 8 to 10 miles outside of the city boundaries. And you're going to learn a lot if you're watching this far, because you already know, because I've disclosed it, that the City of Eustis gave up on this. So you're watching this because you want to understand the process or see how the decision was made. However, the video of the actual meeting, they didn't give a clear explanation of what the issues are in layman's terms. Okay, they use gobbledygook terms like JPA and ISBA and various agreements and so forth, but nobody really clearly lives it out, shows it, and they didn't show you any maps. So I'm going to walk through this from a layman's standpoint. I may make some terminology mistakes here, but I think it's a fairly good representation of what the issues are. And a big reason is that anybody that lives in unincorporated Lake County, you're a retiree, you bought a home. It could be, $50,000 or it could be $1 million home. And you think that you have escaped city taxes. Wrong. You could end up getting gobbled up and annexed into a city later. Now, you may have a vote on it, so it may not be as bad as that. But in this case, one of the issues is that 3 retirement communities out in unincorporated Lake County, outside of Mount Dora and outside of Eustis, out in the Sereno area, when they were built, the developers apparently asked the City of Eustis to run water and sewer lines out there and to provide those services to them rather than digging septic tanks or wells, which is done in some other unincorporated areas. And so the issue is that the City of Eustis claims that the developer agreed that the area would be annexed in later, and it's 13 years ago this happened, and I haven't looked at the legal documents, but then apparently in previous meetings it's come out that many residents didn't read the fine print or didn't understand, or it was not in their documents because maybe the agreement was with the developer but he didn't include it in plain language in the purchase agreements. I don't know. I'll leave that up to the attorneys, but that's something that if you're buying a property or a land in unincorporated Lake County, you better find out who's providing the services and if there's any of these hidden agreements, because there is one in Squirrel Point with Tavares, and they're going to be annexed in about 3 years, and apparently there may be one for Deer Island, which is south of Lake Dora, because the City of Tavares provides them with water and sewer. So anyway, I'm going to walk through some of the issues related to this, show you a map, and then you'll go on to the actual video of the meeting. Okay, so here's what is off of the Eustis website. It is called the ISB boundary map. The dark red areas here, that's Eustis. Okay, then they have an agreement with surrounding cities, like that's Umatilla up there, this is Mount Dora down here, the green is Tavares, and that's Lake Eustis. But they have an agreement that they have boundaries where they can expand, and so you can see that the orange areas are the current boundaries for expansion for Eustis. All right, and then 2 or 3 years ago, they had a meeting of a bunch of cities, and they came up with what are called ISBA agreements, and this somehow redefined how far they could grow, and so you'll see that now this area here, a darker orange, is an area where they City of Eustis can expand that way, as well as these light colored areas. Okay, now they propose to also expand their expansion area for City of Eustis into this area here, which goes down and touches almost Highway 46 and that's Wolf Branch Road running along the bottom there, and Sorrento and Mount Plymouth are right there, and there's one retirement community there, there's another one there, and there's another one down here. And those are the three that are at odds, and that you'll see in the pictures. They're all wearing red shirts and angry as hell because they don't want to be annexed into Eustis. So you'll see how this growth area that Eustis wants to go to is actually kind of sniping off an area that you would think logically Mount Dora would be going that way in growth. Well, the big fight is because the Wekiva Parkway is coming in down here, and it connects with 441 over here, and it dumps into Mount Dora. And so Eustis logically wants to be part of that growth and all the building and everything else. So that's, I think, why they came up with this, because although this is a logical area that they should expand into, just looking at it as a layman, that's not going to have a lot of growth up there. It's all going to be down here from the people coming in from Orlando and from the East Coast on the Wekiva Parkway. So, and the beltway that circles around, and it goes around like that. Okay, so that's the border issues, and they didn't explain that at all in the meeting. They didn't even show a map. They just assumed everybody knew it. Okay, so now let's go and let's look at, I put together a list of the reasons why people are opposing this. The first is that the communities don't want to be part of the city or pay the taxes. The Redtail retirement community does not want to, they've got like $1 million homes in there, and they estimate their taxes could go up to $4,000 a year. And they don't want to pay for it. They already have county services like sheriff, fire comes from the county, and so forth. The only thing they're getting from Tavares is the water. And the state laws say that they have to pay a 25% premium if they get city water and they're not annexed into a city. Okay, so the three communities out there are Sereno Springs, and then Redtail, and then Serenity at Redtail. And they're all in the areas that I pointed out on that map. And we'll just go back here. One of them is up here, one is over here, and one is down there. So at the beginning of this agreement, the City of Eustis said, okay, well, we won't annex those communities, and in, you know, probably between the lines right now. But they still wanted to have this growth area out here. And so then annexation, critics point out that annexation conflicts with residents who wanted the rural lifestyle. Now this is happening on South Lake Dora, where Tavares is annexing land there and increasing the density of the homes, which is another risk, is that their developer wants them to be annexed to get the city services, but then they're going to increase the density of the homes, which conflicts with the 1 to, say, 25-acre homes that are out there. All right, and then the city is trying to implement non-contiguous annexation. It's called leapfrogging, and you'll see that term in the video. And what that means is, if we see that the red areas of the city itself, let's say, provide fire and trash pickup and water and everything there, they've got lines that go out to those three communities for water and sewer. But then the question is, from the county folks, is, okay, you guys gonna pay for the roads? And the cities try everything they can to avoid paying for roads around land they've annexed. So they may annex in areas here, but then they don't want to pay for the road maintenance to service that area. And that's a big bone of contention right now with the county, because they've got something like 1,000 miles of roads, I think, that are like that, where the cities have annexed around them and it's a county road, but then they don't want to pay for the maintenance of the county road. Okay, now here, just looking at Eustis, you can see what are called enclaves. So that area in there, that light orange area, that's an enclave. It's actually county land that was surrounded by land that was annexed in, because maybe the tenants or the residents that existed there did not and would not approve annexation. So you can turn it down. But they probably are paying a premium 25% for water and sewer, or they've got septic and tanks and wells for their water. So then the question is, if you're in that area right there, which is fuzzy, let's try it again. Okay, let's try that one. That's an enclave. And what does that mean? That the county has to have the sheriff and the fire department come from somewhere up here and come all the way down through the city over there? Well, they're working out agreements now where they share that, so that for fire, for instance, some of the cities now they'll agree to, like for instance in that case with an enclave, the county agrees to pay the City of Eustis, who may have the nearest fire station, a fee for going and putting out fires there, or whatever services. So that's one thing that's moving through to reduce the problem with enclaves. My view is, look at this. They got whole chunks there that they've grown all the way around because, for instance, they got the property, say, along that highway. I'm not sure if that's old Highway 441. I mean, it's new. It's a new 441. So that Eustis is annexed down there to get the tax revenue from the businesses there, and then some of that area could be lakes. That's why that might be a lake. But then there are other areas that they didn't annex in, and so they're trying to reap the taxes off of commercial areas, but at the same time not accept responsibility for the enclaves that are within their area. That's always a bone of contention. But the people in the enclaves don't want to pay the city taxes. So if you leapfrog, and there's the borders, the dark red borders is the border of Eustis, and they leapfrog out there to annex a property, then you've got that vacant space in between. So who actually provides all the services? The county does not want to absorb all those costs, and the city just, takes the property tax revenue. And so that's one of the issues. Okay, will the city commit to providing all the city services so far from downtown? And that includes trash pickup, police, even building permits, things like that. That means that the residents would have to go all the way into downtown to file a building permit. Okay, affected residents, in this case of those three communities, they claim there was lack of notification. There was not enough, and or it was not in the purchase agreements. And as I mentioned earlier, that may be a contention with the developer cutting an agreement with the city, but then not making sure it was in the purchase agreements so that people saw that and knew that it was happening. Now, the residents in Squirrel Point have a similar agreement, but they all know. And they know that it expires in about 3 years, and then they're going to be annexed into the city of Tavares. Okay, and then Mount Dora believes that it encroaches on their natural growth path to benefit from the Wekiva Parkway growth benefits. And so if we look here, yes, see, there's Mount Dora. You would think that they logically should be able to grow that way, whether or not Wekiva was there. But Eustis wants to come down here and grab all this area for themselves. So those are the issues. And right now they kind of moot the city of Mount Dora and Eustis have decided to meet and work out this area of, well, who gets what up in this area. Will Mount Dora give in and let them Eustis have any of this area here? I don't know. Mount Dora hasn't been very aggressive in the annexation area. For instance, years ago, I'm looking for my map mouse here. I'll move over to this version of the map. You can see down here that little green speck there is Deer Island. And the Deer Island developers thought and promised people who bought in that area that they would build a bridge to connect Mount Dora to here, and they would annex in. Deer Island would be part of Mount Dora. Well, Mount Dora apparently refused to run the sewer and water lines under the waterway there and into Deer Island. So the developers, like I mentioned, they ended up talking to Tavares. Tavares ran a water line and sewer line all the way over in here to service that area. And so Mount Dora historically has not been very aggressive in negotiating things like this, and maybe it could be just those people don't want growth. They just like their nice little happy artsy craftsy town. And that's enough. So now you can go on and you have an understanding of the issues, and you can watch the video and see them, the drama unfold.
Everyone, thank you for being here tonight. We started a little bit late, but we're sorry for that, but we are going to start. As you know, there are 3 commissions here, and we have to do a roll call. Each of us have to, as the mayors of Mount Dora and the mayor of Eustis, and also our chairman for our Lake County Commission. So we're going to go through that first, and then we'll have a brief explanation of what this process is here tonight. And we encourage you, if you do speak, please come up to the microphone and talk into the microphone like I'm doing right now, because even though you think you have a loud voice, sometimes not everybody hears you. So again, welcome here tonight. Mary, is there a call? Oh, sorry. Call the meeting to order at 6:39? I'm sorry, 5:40. Okay. Could we have a roll call, please?
Vice Mayor Alberti. Here. Commissioner Baum. Here. Commissioner Janine Thompson. Here. Commissioner Sabatini. Not present at the moment. Mayor Moore.
Here. Okay. We'll defer now to Chairman.
Okay. Lake County Board of County Commissioners, all 5 commissioners are present, and I'll introduce them. And rather than do a roll call, I'm Tim Sullivan, County Commission District 1. To my right is Sean Parks, County Commission District 2. To my immediate right is Wendy Breeden, County Commission District 3. Commissioner Leslie Campion, District 4. And Commissioner Josh Blake. Sorry, that's if y'all knew me, you'd understand why I do that. District 5. Also present with us are our County Manager, Mr. Jeff Cole, and our County Attorney, Melanie Marsh. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll call the order the City of Mount Dora's Council, and I'm going to do a roll call. Mayor Jerome, here. Vice Mayor Tillett.
Here.
Mr. Rolson.
Here.
Mr. Tucker.
Here.
Mr. Crail.
Here.
Mr. Slavy.
Present.
And Mrs. Host.
Present.
And also we have Robin Hayes, our City Manager, and Ms. Cross, our Attorney.
All right. Thank you very much. We also introduce here, can you hear me all the way back there now? All right, good. Our City Manager, Von Myberg, our City Clerk, Mary Montez, and our Attorney for the City, Mr. Derek Schrott. Right now, Mr. Schrott is going to explain to you what the joint public meeting process is all about, and he'll give you a brief explanation.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. We're here tonight pursuant to the Florida Governmental Conflict Resolution Act, and that essentially is a law that the legislature passed. Sure. I'll hold the mic. It's a law that the legislature passed to afford local governments the opportunity to resolve their differences without litigation. That's the legislative intent behind the act. This process was formally started by resolution by the City of Eustis back in March of 2016. The City of Eustis identified certain issues of conflict. The county responded with their resolution, as well as the City of Mount Dora. there was a conflict assessment phase, and what that is a fancy term essentially for meetings of the governmental entities designees. So there were meetings with the managers of the City of Mount Dora, City of Eustis, and also the county to try to reach a tentative resolution of the conflict. No resolution was reached. Some of you attended those meetings. I recognize you from some of those meetings. And you have the opportunity tonight to attend this meeting as well as participate publicly in the public comment section. Tonight is what is called the joint public meeting. It's the meeting of the elected officials of the three governmental entities. And the law requires that three things be done at this meeting. One, the parties consider the issues between them. Two, that they try to seek an agreement. The legislature doesn't specify what the terms of those agreements may be. Of course, the elected officials decide what those terms are, but there has to be some kind of effort to seek an agreement of some kind. And that there be a scheduling of additional meetings, either between the conflicting entities or their designees. If this process is unsuccessful, then the next step is a formal mediation under the statute should a conflict still exist. And that mediation would be public under my interpretation of the Attorney General opinion. I think the county attorney agrees, would be a public meeting. So this process would still continue if there's no resolution reached tonight. And with that, I will turn it over back to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to have Ronald Nyberg, our city manager, give the statement of issues.
Thank you, Mayor.
A little technical difficulty, sorry.
Just these things before Yes, ma'am, I do have to read it for the record. Issues to be addressed is identified in the conflict resolution phase. The City of Eustis, per initiating resolution number 1727 on March 16, 2016, initiated the process of ISBA negotiations. The issues presented from the city to the county and the other parties, interested parties, the City of Mount Dora, were general contract terms of the ISBA agreement and the proposed ISBA boundary. At that point later, on May 3rd, 2016, via resolution number 2016-23, the City of Mount Dora, per responding resolution, proposed a Mount Dora ISBA boundary in response to the City of Eustis' boundary submitted in its initiating resolution. The Lake County Board of County Commissioners, per responding resolution number 2016-57, on May 17, 2016, passed a responding resolution to the City of Eustis and identified three items for discussion and negotiations as part of the agreement. One, that the expansion areas create enclaves, are not compact, and in some cases do not directly touch any portion of the current planning boundaries of the City of Eustis. Two, residences residing in the expansion areas fail to receive actual notice that the expansion areas may be and are subject to annexation. Three, negotiations need to be had as to identification of the local government to be responsible for the delivery of funding of the following services within the expansion area: road ownership, construction and maintenance, stormwater management and drainage, utilities, and solid waste. I will ask the two responding parties, does that accurately reflect your issues of concern in your responding resolutions and the issues for negotiations?
Yeah, we agree.
Can we say, we agree, and there probably are additional issues of concern, but those are the
I was just reading a verbatim listing of the issues in the responding resolution from the county. Dora?
We would concur with that.
Thank you very much. At this time, the issue is presentation of current negotiating positions from the bodies. The City of Eustis and the City of Mount Dora and representatives of Lake County had city manager meetings related to negotiations of the terms. The key issues obviously were those identified in the agreement, in the proposed agreement, and much of the discussion centered around the boundaries proposed by the City of Eustis. The City of Eustis presented a proposal to the County Commission in modifying our boundary request, in delaying the annexation of those subdivisions that had existing development agreements with the City of Eustis requiring annexation when contiguous or legally able to be annexed. At this time, the City of Eustis is proposing an elimination of those 3 subdivisions from its ISBA proposal. We are submitting that formally to the Commission for consideration, and will eliminate them, denying the city the right to annex those under the ISBA provisions and any proposed agreement that we are presenting. In addition, the City of Eustis sent a proposal to the City of Mount Dora, making some boundary modifications to the proposed boundary area. Those are identified in the green lines, these areas here. Those parcels are parcels that straddle our proposed ISBA area and currently reside in the joint planning area of the City of Mount Dora. These are that's the Sereno Springs subdivision. These are the Red Tail and Serenity subdivisions. So at this time, the City of Eustis presents this as our formal proposal to both bodies in terms of discussion and the beginning of negotiations. At this time, I will defer to the City of Mount Dora to express your negotiating position and begin discussions, if you wish.
Let's read this thing over here. With respect to our current issues, the City of Mount Dora does not currently have any change in its position on the issues at hand.
So you're saying the boundary proposal submitted to the City of Eustis back in May of 2016 is your current negotiating position?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And the City of Mount Dora is now willing to negotiate any boundary adjustments with the City of Eustis?
Not till we get back.
Okay, so you're wishing to reconvene your body in a separate meeting?
If there's any... If there's any...
We can't hear back here.
I'm sorry, okay.
Either of you. Sorry.
We will take any additional information or suggestions back to a future meeting of our City Council for their consideration.
At this time, I will ask the Lake County Board of County Commissioners to express their negotiating position and present a response to the City of Eustis.
My first question would be, when you say the elimination of those, elimination of those 3 subdivisions, is that a permanent elimination?
It's a permanent elimination from the ISBA boundary and JBA boundaries.
Okay. Well, I would prefer to defer this until we can reconvene, because this obviously is the first time we've heard that. Am I on solid ground there?
Well, I think for purposes of this meeting, we need to go ahead and consider any and all proposals. And then if you don't think you can reach an agreement today and need further time to consider it, then you would reconvene as yourselves and then have those discussions. I think the district commissioner wants to.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate, or have you elaborate, on when you say permanent as to the ISBA boundaries, just so that we understand what you mean by that. Let's say all 3 neighborhoods were eliminated from the ISBA boundaries, and then under the ISBA boundaries, you annexed a neighborhood or property immediately adjacent to Sorrento Springs. Would you then take the position that you could annex that property under the existing developers agreement / utility agreement?
We could make that position, but the position is that under the current joint planning area agreement between the city and Lake County, any annexations outside of our JPA boundary require approval of the Board of County Commissioners. So we could not annex any properties that are not within the JPA boundary or an ISBA boundary. So like this situation, any annexation of those subdivisions would require an affirmative action on the Board of County Commissioners, thereby, in essence, given your positions at the previous meeting, would deny our right to annex those properties.
And to what extent do you want us individually, and I'm asking our county manager and our county attorney to weigh in? I mean, we're here, we're attempting to reach some type of resolution. I think that everybody that's here tonight would like to see closure. I think folks are tired of coming out to meetings and having to figure out what's happening. So, I mean, what I'd like to do is try to engage in some discussion about the proposal, the revision that you made. So from my standpoint, as the district commissioner, eliminating those neighborhoods is a great step in the right direction because it addresses the issue of actual notice, expectations by those neighborhoods. But what it doesn't accomplish is another huge concern, and that is by leapfrogging and annexing, you create confusion. It does not comport with what I believe is good planning. It's not compact, it's not orderly, it doesn't meet the requirements of the Florida Growth Management Act. It's sprawl. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why leapfrog annexations are not a good thing. And for that reason, I am not in favor of ISBAs as a general concept. I think there are times when they serve a purpose of assisting a municipality to annex enclaves and to address areas where there are already enclaves existing. But in this instance, to reach out and create these pockets or islands of municipal areas surrounded by the county is just, I think, bad planning and bad policy.
The county has already approved 7 of these agreements, so I guess my question is why the change in policy from the first 7 agreements to the agreement that's laying with the City of Eustis?
So there were differing opinions on those ISBAs. Each one had its own set of facts, and you could look at each one and see some differences between this situation and those situations. But I can say, as we got further along in the process of approving ISBAs, it became glaringly obvious that the mechanism itself has problems. And so because Eustis, perhaps if Eustis had stepped up right at the beginning and this had been signed out, we would be trying to fix all those problems. Fortunately, we didn't get that far down the road on this one. So if we could go back and do it again, I feel pretty certain that those other ISBAs would not look the way that those maps wouldn't look the way they look today. And one of the big problems that we found is the road issue, road maintenance. Most of the cities, they want to annex the lands and bring in the revenues, but they don't want to take on the road maintenance. And then you get into a big problem of trying to figure out who's responsible for what. And then you have another issue with regard to law enforcement, because you'll have one agency travel down a road and then they'll say, oh, we've just gone back into the county. So we're not going to respond to this call, or we're not going to take the report on this accident. Yes. We're going to wait for the sheriff to arrive. So it gets very confusing with the road issue. And that is probably one of the biggest problems that we've encountered with regard to these agreements.
The contract language is very clear. When the municipality takes over 51% of the road frontage on a road through annexations, the road becomes the maintenance responsibility of that municipality.
Right, but so picture a situation where you're traveling down a road. I could give you examples of where that 51% rule is part of the problem. It is. It doesn't solve anything.
But typical normal annexation processes cause the same problem too, don't they?
Well, typically they're compact because you have to be contiguous. And when you're contiguous, you have a better opportunity to have that continuity, to know where one city ends and another city begins. And even then, we know, everyone in this room, and all of the folks that are here tonight with public safety and law enforcement, they know how difficult it is right now under the old rules where annexations had to be contiguous. By doing these leapfrog annexations, we're only complicating that matter.
I would just, this is Sean Parks, kind of, I would just, I guess I'd be repeating a lot of the same comments, but I agree pretty much with Commissioner Campion. The ISBAs have shown to be, in my opinion, somewhat problematic. That's a term that's used a lot. I actually had experience working on the first ISBA that was implemented in Lake County years ago between Montverde and the county, and it was set up just for one parcel that was kind of a little parcel that was outside of the town of Montverde that was not connected. And so the ISBAs seem to work real well for those kind of situations. But I will agree there are problems with it right now that we're trying to work out, some of which in South Lake, it's the area obviously where I'm from. So I agree with those. And I guess my question would be is wanting to, the concern about the revision that's being proposed today on the table is, just so I'm clear, is it possible though where in 3 or 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, that again in front of the county commission this could be an issue as to whether one of these whole neighborhoods is annexed or not? Because that I do agree. I don't think that's going to be fair to the people that are here tonight or whoever it is in 3 or 4 years to have to go through that again. So it seems like, from what I hear, it seems like that's still possible. Is that true?
The contracts are in place that state that whenever they are legally able to be annexed or contiguous. If this whole thing never happened, if this were to go away today, the City of Eustis would still have the right to annex those properties under normal contiguity processes. Is that correct?
The further we get into this, though, I learned about specific instances where people, for example, I heard today about lot owners in Redtail that actually their closings predated the development agreement with the City of Eustis. So you may have some legal issues there with regard to whether you even have the right to seek enforcement. And then you have the issue of the recent court case that suggests that unless the property owners now currently agree to sign an application to annex, you could not force them to do so even though you have these old developer agreements. So I don't know that it's necessarily a slam dunk that the city can annex these properties just by virtue of those development agreements. And if we could have anything positive come out of this, it would be to create closure for those neighborhoods and give them the chance. And I'm going to ask you just not to applaud because I know you're going to like what I'm about to say. And that is, give them the chance to make the decision one day if they want to be a part of the city, but make that their choice, which is typically how annexations work. People choose to file an application. They choose to go into a city for a particular reason.
Then let me ask this question. If the court case that you cited is valid and it bars the applicability of development agreements, then anybody's concerns of these development agreements are a moot point, correct?
Again, we're back to this issue of closure and certainty, and that case has been decided. There was an appeal. Without going into all of the legal nuances of that, at this point, that's what the law says, and it would appear to be applicable. It may change. It may be that another instance comes up and another type of case is brought and it conflicts with that. And I go back to this issue of certainty and closure, and I think it's just extremely unfair for these neighborhoods to live with that uncertainty.
So given that position, if we could come up with a practical process to get permanent closure to those three subdivisions, would the Lake County Commission agree to a boundary proposal and an ISBA in this area?
And now we're back to the leapfrog issue, because once you do that, now you're opening up, this problem of having islands of the City of Eustis out in areas that are surrounded by unincorporated areas. And another issue I want to point out that has come up since these ISBAs were put into effect. When, let's say the city does annex, one of these islands out there, and they annex them, and then they have their land use hearing and their zoning hearing to put their land use and zoning on that property. All of the surrounding residents affected by that they're not City of Eustis residents. So when they come in to make their voices heard, you as a city, you may not want to listen to what they have to say because they don't vote for you. They don't participate in your elections. They're not city residents. And so one of my own personal problems with this ISBA process is that I believe it disenfranchises residents.
I would suggest that the process of boundaries and zoning exists right now. What's to stop Lake County Board of Commissioners approving a zoning request of an unincorporated piece of property currently bordering the City of Eustis without the City of Eustis having any say in the process? Likewise, Eustis. We're not exaggerating anything more than already exists. Where developments come in that border different governmental entities, the quote disenfranchisement already exists.
No, it doesn't. I can give you an example. The Lake County and the City of Mount Dora has had a joint planning area in place for a number of years. And the way that functions is that we actually defer to their land use, we defer to their LDRs. When we have conflicts between what our LDRs would allow and theirs would allow, we attempt to sort of merge those together and take into consideration what each other's LDRs have in effect. So that's when a JPA is functioning correctly, it can work and it can protect adjoining residents.
Then what would prohibit us from entering into the same type of agreement as we negotiate a new JPA agreement and an ISBA agreement?
Well, I think the ISBA is off the table because we're just not interested in creating more difficulty by going down the ISBA road. If you want to come back with a JPA proposal that would just focus on the land use side of things, on the land development regulations and the densities and those types of issues, which is what the JPA is typically about, and it addresses the extent to which you could annex properties without a subsequent approval by the county. But right now, all we have is SBA and JPA proposal. If you want to come back, I think that's something
The
we...
JPA expansion doesn't do anything for us, but give us the ability to annex properties that we could eventually become contiguous with. 13 years ago, the County Board of Commissioners took property from the City of Eustis, from our JPA, gave it to Mount Dora, in effect blocking us from doing contiguous annexations in an area where we already had an established utility base. So the question is where is the City of Eustis's ability to grow and develop if the County Board of County Commissioners is going to deny us that ability in areas that for 13 years we've had a physical presence, have provided development opportunities that the county has benefited from?
Well, I can just say this. The City of Eustis is a utility provider. That's the service that the City of Eustis has provided. And yes, it's a really important service, but it's a utility service. And that's what you have provided out in the Sorrento area. As far as the county blocking your ability to grow, I would beg to differ. By looking at a map, there are other routes to get to Sorrento. It may be 20 years from now, though.
I'll just say briefly, I know that I have the least amount of experience with the ISBA since I've been on the commission before. Is that better?
Yeah.
There we go. I've only been on a commission for a short period of time, but in that short period of time, it's been nothing but problematic from what I've seen on the commission. And my two main areas, for the purpose of being on the record, for those who haven't been at previous meetings, we've discussed this. The idea of forced annexation, I think, is a problem for me. And the idea of non-contiguous annexation, I think, is I just have sort of an innate opposition to that concept. And in particular, with the area we're talking about, Sorrento, I've called it sort of the rush to colonize Sorrento. I think there are a lot of people who are opposed to that. And the non-contiguous side, I think it's just the ability to cherry pick the communities that you think will be financially beneficial and leave them behind.
Within the confines,
Please use the mic.
we picked and developed a compact boundary. And I know there was conversations regarding that Red Tail's 11 miles from downtown Eustis. And obviously, we made point of it at the last commission meeting that Deer Island is 11 miles from downtown Tavares. And that was described as a compact ISBA boundary. So I don't agree with the argument that our boundary is not compact when the geographic distance is the same as an ISBA boundary that was already approved by the Board of County Commissioners. We didn't cherry pick anything. We picked an area that we felt we could serve with our municipal services and our current utility services. We didn't overextend. We have demonstrated and will demonstrate that we have the ability and will provide quality services to those areas. Now, we've acquiesced to the only, and to your credit, Commissioner Blake, you did say at that last meeting you were totally opposed to non-contiguous annexations, and I understand that and respect that. But there were other commissioners that only expressed concern about the annexations of the 3 subdivisions without their permission. Here we have acquiesced to that concern, and now that we've done our part as we understood it, now we're being totally shut out from any opportunity for the City of Eustis to grow.
Can I just go back to just not to ignore that comment, but something that was mentioned about JPAs and certain situations where the land use or zoning decision might occur in the county, and would the county listen to city folks, and vice versa, would the city council listen to the county folks? Regardless of what happens here through this process, something that I do see, and I will certainly, county could be guilty just as much as any city, and I'm not going to name any cities, but I hope that we can stop that, because I have heard situations where either council at sometimes would say, well, maybe not directly, but just as the discussion has gone through some of these decisions, where, hey, those are county folks. It really it doesn't matter as much. This is a city decision, and then at times it's almost like, hey, leave us alone, county. And I hope. And I'm not saying that occurs here at all. I don't want to imply that. I don't want you to walk away that that's happened here with these two cities. But I hope that we can, whatever happens here, that we can get past that, because I mean, we all serve everybody out here. So whether you're in the county or the city, you're still in the county, and you're still our community. So thank you.
Ron, I believe when we met, was it just yesterday, I believe I did also say that I was really not in favor of ISBAs as a general as well.
No, yesterday you did, ma'am, but at the previous commission meeting, the concern was focused on the annexation of the 3 subdivisions.
Well, that's where we were getting the most input. But previous to being the commissioner for many years, I was a staff member, and in staff meetings, I remember hearing some of the problems with the ISBAs, and I think because of that, you know, we have great cities. Eustis is a great city. You know, I respect each one of you, and this is not really against Eustis. This is a philosophy. Thank you.
And I've been holding the mic for some time, but I will be honest with you. I am not in favor, only because this country is too mean. And I'm going to tell you something. I don't feel like sitting up here for 1 or 2 hours hearing a bunch of negative remarks about Eustis, and in fact about annexation. If we can't do things in love, as far as I'm concerned, we can hurry up and shut this thing down and everybody goes home. Because the bottom line is, Eustis has fed many families. It has been good. And the services that we offer are good services. And we don't have to beg. There are some things that we should do. Yes, we've got to improve our schools. And we do need to, and I'm going to be honest, if we just improve our schools, the city itself will grow. So I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not here trying to beg anyone to be a part of Eustis. And I'm going to be honest, I'm probably very disappointed, because with this meeting, people aren't going to change their hearts. They've already made up their minds. So basically, we have nothing to really talk about, because hearts and minds are already made up. Thank you.
No, I just want to, no, I just want to respond to Linda too. I think what you said is extremely profound and accurate, and I think that's been part of, I know the statute calls out, do this, then you do this, and then if that doesn't work, then you have mediation. If we were actually trying to, we had issues that we could truly work out and come to a resolution, this process might work. But what's happened is that with each step of the way, it's as if it's polarized all the positions even more. And I had hoped that this would just be dropped, and then if anything could be worked out, it could be worked out after we were outside of this type of a process. But I think that at this point, I do think that this entire process we've gone through has polarized positions, and I think Eustis is a wonderful place. I respect all of the Eustis commissioners and the Eustis staff, and I think Eustis has a lot to offer. No question about it. But when you're in a position of somewhat forcing folks to do something they don't want to do, that's a very bad position to be in. And I think that it unfortunately has created a lot of bad feelings. And I think that's just, it's too bad that that has occurred. And again, I would just put my request in that this petition be withdrawn, and that if we're able to work out anything, it would be to relook at the joint planning area to see if there's a way to address the joint planning area.
Sorry, this is Mayor Moore. I kind of agree with you about looking at that, and I thought that's what we're going to do tonight, is talk about a different JPA maybe, and talk about some of the discussions, because I'm tired of hearing the same story too. I've told you all so many times that development agreements, commissioners, county commissioners, non-Dora commissioners, councilmen, we will all go away. And who's going to uphold some kind of a document that was not upheld for us here in Eustis? It's obvious it was a developers agreement. It was signed by one of the mayors, and everyone anticipated that would be a situation that would help Eustis at some point, but apparently they were trying to help a community that wanted to build. So Eustis put its best foot forward, did everything it was requested to do, and then 13 years later we're here thinking, okay, so that was for naught. And I understand the commissioners come and go. What we're trying to do is bring continuity to our city. It's obvious we could definitely benefit from a JPA agreement, something that allows our city to be able to move forward. Even the development of another property over by Sorrento Springs doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be contiguous. I mean, it will be contiguous, but it doesn't mean that we'll be out there looking, as you say, cherry pick. That's not the process here. When developers come to us and say we'd like to be able for you to provide utilities, I think that makes sense to us to be able to help that developer out too, because I think it's a worthwhile cause. And it's not always about the money. It's also about being able to provide a service that we believe we do very well. We have capacity there to do that. And somehow, at some point, and I know I've only been a resident a short time here in Eustis, but we need to be able to get some respect for what it is that we are able to do, what we have done in the past. Everybody seems to forget that. We made a commitment to be able to provide utilities in that area, and nobody wants to think about what that meant to that commission back then. That was quite a stride. And then again, as you see, the politics became involved, and all of a sudden we have a cut. It went right through the area that Eustis was hoping. My understanding is there was an agreement at one point, maybe a gentleman's agreement, that everything north of 441 was going to probably be a Eustis kind of a JPA, and that was again thrown in Eustis' face. Now, I cannot go back and apologize for those folks who were commissioned before I was. But in my situation, obviously I would not want to annex any property that does not want to be a part of the city of Eustis either. It's obvious. We wouldn't do that. We have enclaves around the city of Eustis don't want to be part of the city of Eustis. We understand that. So what you're saying tonight is all things we already know. But Eustis still, as a city of 20,000 people, does not grow very quickly. It needs to be able to provide more services to its clients, to its community, but also providing homes for folks who are interested in living in the municipality. So that's our motive here. It's not, we can't obviously issue a rubber check. I can't say that in the future, if there's some contiguity, that another commission may decide, either the county decides it's had enough of unincorporated areas and wants to just let the city take it over. That might happen. I can't tell you what's going to happen. So I can't sign an agreement with the states for the next 20 years, because as you see, the development agreement that we had, we thought we had some teeth in that agreement. It doesn't work today. As you know, anything that we sign as a contractual form can be with our attorneys present can be changed. So we can't make that commitment. But it is important for us to know that Eustis is here to grow to, and we want to be able to make it effective for us, for our current residents, and also for any of those who want to be residents of the City of Eustis. So I guess to follow up, excuse me, I think we should have a discussion. I don't want to leave here either trying to think that this is, everybody's kind of guessing, is this done, or are we going on another step? We need to talk about some sort of a JPA that both the cities of Mount Dora and Eustis can get around, and also the Board of County Commissioners. If we leave here without any of that being accomplished, I'm sorry, all your red shirts will be back again for the next 2 or 3 times. We don't need that. We need to be talking about what's good for Eustis and for Mount Dora, and figure out what that JPA is going to look like, and have the county assist us and Mount Dora, and we would assist Mount Dora, and they would assist us in getting to that point. There are just some things on this map that make sense to do, and that's what we need to talk about. We've given up, as you said, the annexations of those 3 properties, and rightfully so. My colleague, Commissioner Boggs, said it right. If people don't want to be annexed into our city, we're not going to force that. So, and I've said that already, so that's where we are today. We should be talking about some sort of another plan, alternate plan.
I guess the question, obviously, these meetings are tied to an ISBA agreement. Mount Dora stated their position in terms of their boundary. I guess the question is, if I can ask to individually poll the county commissioners, is there any interest on the county commission's part to enter into an ISBA agreement for any properties within those areas? We currently have 3 projects that will benefit us, that will benefit the county, that we can effectuate that growth and derive benefit to both the county and the City of Eustis by effectuating that growth by providing those utilities. We're making a $7.5 million investment in that area. We do not need water and sewer money. We need, like many governing bodies, we need ad valorem dollars to run our operations. Our ability to grow is tied to our ability to get new ad valorem dollars by effectuating growth. We can do that. So I guess our question is, so that we can move forward and consider what to do in regarding the next step of the process, is to individually ask the commissioners, is there any interest from the county commission to give us an ISBA agreement anywhere in that proposed area?
From my point of view, if we exclude the 3 existing subdivisions, then I'm willing to work on a different, but my consensus is that sitting in this position as chairman, that I'm in the vast minority. So while I am willing to entertain that, I believe the JPA is the next step to move this thing forward. But I can't speak for my fellow commissioners, because if just taken from the consensus here, and part of the problem is that we have learned the ISBA process as we've done it, and we've not in addition to the problems that we've identified here, we've identified other problems in other municipalities which will remain nameless because we're trying to work on those. But so there's some reluctance there to have another ISBA until we work out the fine-tuning and the details. Road ownership and construction, we are overwhelmed with the building of roads, and we're literally outrun our resources to do that at the present time. So none of these subdivisions would be here today if you hadn't run utilities for them. So that's why I'm open to the question. But if we could exclude those, then I am open to renegotiating a different territory and to the ISBA. But my take is here is I'm in the minority. So anybody disagree?
I continue to stand affirm that non-contiguous annexations, I'm not in favor of I am not in favor of non-contiguous annexations. So if the 3 parcels that you're referring to are the ones that are in the general vicinity of Sorrento Springs, that's a problem. I look at State Road 44 and I wonder, so would your police officers patrol just those 3 areas and that part of 44 and a portion of 437 and then all the in-between areas would be the sheriff? I mean, those are the kind of real practical issues that arise when you do non-contiguous annexations. If those 3 parcels were, say, within 1,000 feet of your current boundary, and we were talking about trying to rectify that type of situation, I think it would be very different. You know, we could agree that, okay, for that 1,000 feet, then we would defer to you all being the chief law enforcement agency in that area. But there's just too big of a gap. There's too big of an area where it would create confusion and it would just, I mean, I think it just speaks for itself, the distance, the proximity.
The distance between our current proposed boundary and our existing JPA boundary is less than a mile. So I don't believe that's an issue. I mean, the county sheriff's department patrols how many hundreds of miles of roads, so we can effectively provide services in that area. Otherwise, we would not be making this proposal.
I mean, I'm looking at your city limits on this map in relation to those 3 neighborhoods, and
Which 3 neighborhoods?
well, the 3 parcels that you're referring to.
Well, we're not asking only for those 3 parcels. We're asking, certainly we would like those 3 parcels. We would certainly like additional properties in that area. Our question is, are you willing to negotiate a reasonable boundary that minimizes the impacts? Obviously, we can negotiate an agreement that addresses the problems that you've had with previous agreements. Use our agreement as a working document to correct those problems moving forward with the existing ISBA.
Okay, so in concept, what you just said sounds good, but then when I look at the map and I see where those 3 neighborhoods are in relation to your current city boundaries, it's just not workable. I mean, it would be different if it were in a very close distance to your current boundaries, but it's not. It's just, so, you asked the question and you wanted to poll each one of us, and so that's my answer, that I would not be in favor of that.
Okay.
Just my experience with ISBAs, there's a lot of room to be creative and possibly do some things that are good. So I would say I certainly wouldn't rule out an ISBA because of that, although as I said earlier, I've seen a lot of problems. But I am not, excuse me, I am not for anything that would force annexation. So, and I know, obviously for the people in the room, but you need to set up any kind of situation in the future that also has a forcible annexation. And
we can't force annex those properties in unless the county commission gives us permission. If we exclude them from the ISBA boundary and the JPA boundary, we cannot annex those properties under any terms without acquiescence from the Board of County Commissioners. So they will have as equal protection under an ISBA excluding them than they currently have right now.
okay, so if you're providing utilities in the future, then it's something that's in the county, you're saying we would
No. Any annexations would be of any of those properties would be voluntary.
even if they're going to be on just Eustis utilities for indefinite.
You mean for new projects?
For new projects.
We would require annexation prior to us providing utilities. So we would and.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's where I was talking right now too. So,
Well,
and it's not just Eustis. Obviously, the city's made out like you say that, but it's anywhere.
I guess the question is it fair for the City of Eustis to provide utilities and not ask for those properties at some point in the future? Individuals want want urban services.
I understand.
So
it's a tough.
We're just saying this is going to be, we are willing to acquiesce and leave the 3 subdivisions that apparently weren't given notice of their requirement to annex in exchange for utility services from the City of Eustis. We will require all future developers in the area, when they get utilities, to give specific direct notice to buyers of their properties. We will put that in the agreement. That will be in any and all purchase contracts of buyers, so they know up front that they will be subject to annexation. But we would like to allay that and be able to develop those properties now within the City of Eustis, so anybody that goes in and buys a house in there knows it's already within the City of Eustis. By giving us ISBA, we can effectuate those projects now. We can annex those properties now. We can effectuate that growth and benefit both parties in the process.
One thing I'm very interested in is JPAs, and whatever happens from here on out. Some of you heard me say this, there's 1,000 people a day moving to Florida again. We're projected to grow some 100,000 people. I think we just, all of us, county included definitely, just need to be careful about how we plan for growth. So anything that we can do to improve joint planning, and not just where oftentimes I think it's going to require elected bodies to meet face-to-face more than we do now. I mean, this is pretty unusual to have this here under this circumstance, but probably this should happen a little more regularly, and where we're talking about how we can plan together and be a little more, I would say selective, but we're getting better development as we grow for all of our residents. So I'm all for a JPA process that we can totally revise and redo that as well, come up with some standards that we share and processes that are in place to actually to help the residents too become more involved, because it's very confusing about different agencies, who's doing what, who's got jurisdiction, and different agreements, and where do we have to go. So I would be on the record to say that I would be all for looking at some JCA processes.
In conjunction with an ISBA agreement with the City of Eustis?
I would say that I would, no, independent of that. I mean, we should do the JPA anyway. Again, the ISBAs, they certainly, I don't think they should go away in the statute sense. I mean, I think there's some usefulness to them. In this case, I'm not sure. I certainly would say maybe there's something to be had here, but I don't see it right now. So.
But would you be willing to consider an ISBA agreement if we could allay your concerns?
No, I don't. Not right now.
I just have to make an editorial here also, because there's some comments or some hisses coming out from the crowd here that what happens in most municipalities, they're all there to try and add to that valorem. It's because we always have more services that people are looking for. There's a lot of infrastructure needs. So please understand that this, even though the city's interested, so is Mount Dora interested. Other cities are interested in taking some of those unincorporated areas. Unincorporated areas. So it's not just Eustis. You've got to understand that states, the federal government, the counties all rely on those tax dollars to be able to provide the service that people demand or ask for. So let's make sure that's off the table. We don't want to hear that Eustis is a land grabber. Everybody in this state does the same thing. So you have to understand, if you don't know public administration, you don't know that's reality. Let's find out from around the table who would do that for free. Probably nobody. And every city, every county would want to continue doing it. So because public administrators do this for a living, they do this, in some cases the commissioners get paid pretty much a voluntary kind of stipend, but those are the kind of things we do to make sure our cities thrive. We don't do it because we want to raise your taxes. We don't do that. We do it because it's the right thing to do for our community, and it's the right thing for the folks who want to live in our community.
So just to be clear, though, there are municipalities that are in the utility business that will provide utilities outside of their city limits without requiring annexation. That
agreed.
And so it is possible that there. the municipality will provide service outside of their municipality without requiring annexation. It is not a given that they have to go hand in hand. The state of Florida provides in the Florida statutes that a municipality providing utility services outside of their jurisdiction is permitted to charge a 25% surcharge. And that happens all over the state of Florida. So this idea that they have to go hand in hand just isn't accurate. And the other thing that I want to point out is that this particular area, the Sorrento, Mount Plymouth area, is very unique when compared to other unincorporated communities around the county. It has already a lot of services. It is not an underserved area. There is a library, there is a regional park, there's a fire station, there is an EMS substation, there is a sheriff's substation. There are multiple services already in the area. So their response times are fast with regard to public safety. And so if we were talking about a situation where the City of Eustis had provided utilities and we had an underserved area, that they were, having 15 to 20 minute response times on fire services, we may be in a different, this may be a different discussion. But the facts are that this area is already served to a large degree.
I think I indicated already. At this point, I don't see a compelling benefit to the county to enter into an ISBA, either with Eustis or respectively Mount Dora or any other city at this point.
Well, I guess let me ask this question, because what the people in the crowd don't understand, when the City of Mount Dora earlier said that they are not changing their boundary proposal, the City of Mount Dora currently has an ISBA proposal before the county. Now, that could be either a ISBA boundary proposal, it can also include a JPA boundary, giving them rights of annexation. Their boundary proposal includes your subdivisions. Their boundary proposal includes the Sorrento Springs subdivisions. So Eustis is not the only municipality that is looking at this area for growth. So we're sitting here being called land grabbers. You have another municipality that is also coveting the same areas, and as a matter of fact, an area that is much larger than the area that we are proposing. So your quote, concerns are not just with the City of Eustis, it's to our neighbors to the south as well.
I just included.
I'm sorry, yeah?
I just included the City of Mount.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But they're not pursuing any.
And I would be willing to look at a JPA, but to tell you the truth, and I think I've mentioned this before, the boundary, Mount Plymouth Sorrento has a community identity and a long-standing community identity, even though they are not incorporated. And I think the boundaries go too far.
Our proposal does not include the Mount Plymouth Sorrento CRA area. So the traditional Mount Plymouth Sorrento area is not part of our proposal.
Well, the CRA is just part of that, what is described as the identity. That's just part of, it's just kind of the downtown area. But I did want to point out that the City of Mount Dora, and they can correct me if I'm wrong here, but they did put their map out there, but they have essentially withdrawn any discussion about going forward with that. We entered into, and I don't know if we've already executed it, but an automatic aid agreement with regard to fire services, and that addresses the fire service issue. And at this point, they're not asking for further consideration of that ISBA. So maybe they can clarify, but we haven't had any request to proceed with that.
That is correct. That is correct. We have not proceeded any further at this point in time. We do have automatic aid agreements on the fire services as well as police services. And We are very content and happy with our JPA with the county. It works very well for the city at this point in time. So we are working toward the Innovation District, which is within JPA, which is also within ISBA boundaries, but that's the area we're working toward at this point in time.
So I guess my question is, since you have no intentions of moving into that area, that you're currently happy with the boundaries, then what is your concern with the boundary that we've proposed taking over?
The main concern of the city council was that it blocked us from any kind of growth going to our east or even almost to our north and the whole area out there on the Britt Road side. It totally blocks totally Mount Dora into what we are right now, and we had no growth whatsoever, and that was not any kind of arrangement that Mount Dora City Council was willing to live with.
Can I ask this? Obviously, the county commission is not, at least, well, we haven't heard completely from them, but at this point, we feel that there's obviously no concern, and they're encouraging us to come to them with a JPA proposal. Obviously, you have interest in any JPA modifications. Would you be willing to modify your consideration of boundaries from an ISBA consideration to an expansion of that and converting those into JPA boundaries?
I think we would need to look at the JPA suggested areas. Again, the city's also concerned about the leapfrogging. We do have property that you're leaping over in the lakes of Mount Dora on 44, and I think we have to look at that whole area. Again, from our perspective on the services, that is a concern for us, as well as out on the Britt Road area, as well as Wolf Branch. So again, I think we can discuss that and present it to the council for consideration. But I think all of that needs to be taken into consideration.
Correct.
The area.
But if we eliminate the ISBA, that eliminates any leapfrogging concerns. That only limits us to contiguous annexation procedures.
Yes, if the City of Eustis withdraws the ISBA, I would assume that I could present to this council withdrawal of the ISBA on the Mount Dora side, and there could be some discussion on further expanding the JPAs.
Would the county commit, obviously I'm going to go on the premise, and correct me if I'm wrong, other than Commissioner Sullivan, that there is no interest from the majority of the county commission to enter into an ISBA agreement?
I would agree.
Okay. Can we ask this as we move forward? There seemed to be some impetus and interest on the county commission to grant us the ability to expand our JPA boundaries. Can we then convert what our current boundary is from an ISBA boundary to a JPA boundary, commence negotiations on an adjustment of those boundaries from an ISBA boundary to a JPA, and work in concert with Mount Dora to amend those to be JPA boundaries as opposed to ISBA boundaries?
Well, speaking as a district commissioner, I wouldn't support just trading out your map that shows an ISBA and then converting that to a JPA. I would be looking at boundaries that are more that are closer to the city nucleus.
And the City of Mount Dora would also concur on that, I believe. So we would need to re-look at those boundaries before we would just exchange the ISBA out and call it a JPA. I don't think that would accomplish what we're actually trying to sit here to do today.
No, I mean, obviously we're setting, I'm trying to give my commission some direction, and if they feel that there's some willingness on the parties' part to negotiate a JPA expansion, a reasonable JPA expansion into that area. Grant, I know you're, Commissioner Campion, you're talking about a nuclear boundary of the city, but obviously any nucleus can grow, and that's what we're asking, is to grow our nucleus. So if there's willingness on your body's part and the City of Mount Dora's part, I can recommend to this body that we end the ISBA process as long as there's a good faith effort to give us sincere consideration of JPA expansions in those areas where we're providing services, and at least through traditional processes allow us to grow. That's always been promised to us, that we should be able to grow naturally, and give us the ability to grow naturally in those areas where we already have a physical presence, a long-standing physical presence.
I do feel like we need to come misunderstand it.
We would be asking for an expansion of that boundary. It would be a contiguous boundary. So we would submit a revised boundary that would be contiguous to our existing JPA boundary. That makes sense from an ability to provide services. Now, just because it's in the JPA doesn't mean we're immediately going to annex. We would have to have voluntary annexations. We would have to establish contiguity of those properties to be annexed. And it would allow us to grow under the provisions that's provided by law. All we're asking, if you're not willing to give us the ability to grow through ISBA, give us the willingness to grow through traditional means, through an expansion of our JPA boundary. Give us something.
Well, I think we need to address one issue at a time.
Can't hear you.
I think we need to address one issue at a time. I believe that we're willing to talk about JPAs and reworking JPAs from a planning point of view. But I believe the consensus of the board that I'm chairman of is that we end the ISBA process tonight.
And I'm willing to recommend to my commissioners here to do that as well if there's a sincere consideration to be given by the Board of County Commissioners to expand our JPA boundary into those areas that we're currently providing services to.
And Ron, you're talking about those areas where you already have your utilities. And so you're essentially saying just trade out these two maps. And I just am not comfortable doing that. And I appreciate your negotiating skills here, but I don't think that we're going to agree to give you the kind of assurances that you say you need in order to drop this. So if that's the case and the city wants to continue on, then we will all have to spend taxpayer dollars to go through a mediation that will bring us essentially to where we are tonight. And I believe that too much money has already been wasted on this process, and that the ISBA discussion needs to be closed, and then in good faith we can sit down and talk about a JPA boundary.
So your answer to my question is yes, you would be willing to give sincere consideration to the JPA expansion. If we drop the ISBA.
Since you're using the words good faith, then please don't put words in my mouth, okay? I did not agree to say that where you're providing services is where I would be comfortable with the JPA boundary, okay? So we would really need to go back to square one and talk about what makes sense from a planning perspective.
And from the city of Mount Dora, I could present to the council, if Eustis did drop the ISBA, we would also present a consideration to withdraw that, but there would have to be a rediscussion or a discussion of looking at all the boundaries within the JPA. We are definitely willing to work our JPA. Again, we have a good relationship with the county on the JPA, so we're willing to be a partner there. But I would not recommend to the council to allow just the dropping of what's currently called as an ISBA just to replace the verbiage and call it a JPA. That's not a fair assessment for the city to look at.
Fair assessment from the standpoint is that we have three governmental entities that want to derive benefit from this area. I mean, you're making a multi-million-dollar investment in utilities in the area, your innovation district. You've obviously identified it as an area of growth for the city of Mount Dora. Obviously, the city of Eustis has done the same. Either the county commission is going to say, Mount Dora and Eustis come together and agree on an equitable split of this growth area that I think most everybody in this room agrees is going to grow given the 429 expansion. Or the county commission can take the stand right now that we're not going to give it to anybody and leave it out of all JPAs. I think it's fair to the bodies that have the desires for this area to try at this point to reach an equitable agreement on a JPA expansion in exchange for us dropping our ISBA.
City of Board totally disagrees with that assumption.
I would like to make a motion that we do not continue any discussions. I don't think that we're at that point. I am serious when I say I'm not in the begging business. And I think that that we don't need any of it right now. And we'll talk about it and come up with a plan whenever that time comes. But I can tell you, hearts and minds are made up. We aren't getting anything. So I think that we need to go on and vote and close this thing out and go on.
Is there a second? Okay, no seconds. Okay.
I guess at this point, is there any willingness on the governing bodies to negotiate anything related to ISBA this evening? Okay. To clarify to the people in the crowd, the City of Eustis is dropping its desire to annex you under ISBA provisions. So if any of these bodies agree to an ISBA, we would not have the ability to annex you unless the county commission acquiesces, be it next week or 10 years from now. Nothing changes now, is that we have the right to annex you once it becomes legally viable or you become contiguous. So under the provision, nothing changes on what we believe are valid agreements. We would consider permanently and forever doing that if the commission, the county commission, would grant us some sort of ISBA in the area, and permanently to eliminate the ability for us to annex you under the terms of those agreements. At this point, they're unwilling to do that. So the agreements in our position are still valid and in place to move forward. To the three bodies, given the positions where we're at, and do we want to open this for public comment?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make clear for the record that at least in this one seat, one council member that was put forward that Mount Dora was unwilling to negotiate. And I don't think that was a fair statement. So I just wanted to be in the record that I couldn't let this meeting end without making that statement. So thank you.
Basically, we didn't say we were not going to negotiate that. What we heard so far is we will take any action taken tonight under advisement at a future, for our council to go back at a future date for the council to consider any proposals that come out of this meeting tonight.
So to clarify your position, Mayor, if the City of Eustis does not drop the ISBA process tonight, you would come back to us with a counter proposal on the offer that we've made you?
No, we've already made a counter offer to the City of Eustis, and I am standing by the statement that I opened with tonight.
So what you're saying is you're not going to change or offer any counter proposal. Basically, there's no change from your original position. Your original boundary submitted is the same. So you're not willing to negotiate an equitable split of those properties.
Point of order.
Two different things you're bringing up. Okay.
One answer, you gave two quick.
Okay.
Two alternate questions, and you can't answer both at the same time in the same way.
Answer one.
Repeat that again. What's the only one?
Mayor, if I could please, Mayor. The fact that we won't negotiate to their position is not that we are not negotiating. Just because we're not going to acquiesce and take their deal doesn't mean we're not negotiating. We are here and we are negotiating. And our advocacy is for our position. But we are negotiating here this evening. And for us to be painted in any way other than willing to work with all the entities would be a misstatement. That is all we're saying here.
I agree with your statement 100%, Mr. Slavin.
Thank you.
I agree with you too. I think you're right. This is to try and get a resolution to this issue, and we don't certainly want that to happen. But I think the process the ISBA has definitive terms that they use, and unfortunately those are part of the law. So we understand where you're coming from too. We understand.
We're back to the issue of public comment.
So,
I'm not sure.
I don't think we're supposed, public comments come after negotiation, or negotiations closed?
Well, that's what I'm stating, unless the parties are willing to discuss specifics. Mount Dora is telling us that they're not willing to, at this point right now, to negotiate a boundary proposal until they meet as a body to come to a position. At this point, there is minimal consideration from the city, or excuse me, from the Board of County Commissioners on an ISBA agreement. I guess my question to my commissioners is, given the position of the county commission, basically majority and they'll correct me if I'm wrong, 4 of the 5 commissioners are telling us that they are not willing to negotiate any terms of an ISBA agreement in that area. Did I accurately state that, commissioners?
Yes.
So the question is does the City of Eustis wish to proceed to the mediation process, which would entail the 3 parties agreeing on a federal mediator to come in and try and mediate an equitable agreement between the parties. I had a mediator once tell me that a mediator is only good as if the parties are willing to come to an agreement. It appears that the county commission is not willing to work with us to try and give us some sort of ISBA presence in that area. So for your consideration, is given those facts at this point, do you wish to proceed to the next step of the process of mediation?
I will speak for myself. I am not willing. I feel that we should, my recommendation again is that we draw all ISBA or what's the other one? Just drop everything, everyone go home and say those nasty, mean comments. I will tell you that you have worked hard with it. I do appreciate the fact that you have worked hard with it, but you know that I have felt this way for a long time, and I am publicly saying that I am not in favor of it. And that is my recommendation.
I want to make sure you hear me well. My name is Carla Jeanette Thompson. I was raised in Cassia. I love Sorrento. I love Mount Plymouth. I believe the ISBA is off the table. But let's talk about the JPA. I think we need to work with each other, because if we don't work with each other, our communities are going to hurt. Now, I was asked at the first meeting, and I'm not going to bring her name up, but you all know her. She goes, Carla, what do you think about this? I didn't know as much then as I do today. I can see both sides of Red Tail and the other. I cannot, and I understand where you're coming from, and I can understand when Stearman reached out 13 years ago and provided services. It doesn't take a genius to understand that. But if we don't get together with our boundaries in town, Mount Dora's boundary, Eustis boundary, who's going to take Sorrento, who's going to take Mount Plymouth, and no one's going to take Cassia. So I'm going to tell you, I was raised in Cassia, but we were underneath Eustis. Cassia's 15 miles out of town. The Baptist Church Association made sure cash at Baptist Church was okay. Lake County Sheriff's Department was there. Anytime we needed something, whether it was from the Eustis Women's Club or whatever, Eustis looked after cash. Mount Dora looked after Sorrento and Mount Plymouth. And if we're going to change that, let's be fair. But as y'all wanted Red Tail to have a voice, let the people in those areas have a voice. Thank you.
Real close. I guess I'm the last commissioner to speak. And as I sit here, I look to my county commission as leaders. And I look at the tremendous amount of intellect within the commissioners. But the main thing I'm looking at is their leadership. And there's an old saying, throw a dog a bone. I feel that negotiation is much better than mediation. And I believe that the city came back and took the annexation of your properties off the table. There has to be, along with that intellect at the commission level, also that creativity that some of us forget that we have. And I suggest you pull from those resources. And if you don't have those resources, you go to people who you think are good resources. And see if you can come up with something that makes it work for all of us. That is what leaders do. And leaders doing that unite us. So that is what I would like to see done. I believe that the opportunity is here, the leadership is here, the creativeness is here, and I feel that, again, mediation should come after negotiation. I think we got a little backwards here. So I'm all for seeing if we can work something out.
Okay.
And I'm no attorney, okay? I don't have an MBA. I'm just speaking from my heart.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm going to move out of my role as mayor here, and I'm going to make a motion that is very similar to Commissioner Boggs' motion, except it doesn't eliminate JPA. But I would like to make a motion, hopefully get a second, to stop the discussion, to end the discussion about the ISBA for those three communities. And hopefully I get a second.
Second.
Okay. Can we get a roll call vote, please, Mary?
I'm sorry, which one is that?
Carl. It's to eliminate the discussion of the... Right, I'm sorry. It's to end the ISBA contract negotiation. Okay, we have a second by Carl. Commissioner Thompson, I'm sorry. Roll call. Oh. So you have to do it.
My turn. Vice Mayor Alberti? Aye. Commissioner Aye. Commissioner Janine Thompson?
Aye.
Mayor Moore?
Aye.
Given the Eustis Commission's action, is there any further need? Obviously, item 7, scheduling further meetings, is a moot point. Is there any interest on either body's part to have public comment on this issue? Then the bodies can go through your processes to adjourn the meeting.
I'd like to thank you for being here tonight. I think this is a democracy process, so thank you very much for being here. All of you here have increased our population tremendously tonight, so thank you for being here. We are adjourning our Eustis City Commission meeting.
All right, so
Boy, it goes quickly. Once it starts
there
down,
it goes,
I'll tell
the
you,
Eustis sun fading from the sight
It is beautiful.
after the meeting.
I didn't know you could see that going down here. We have the best sunsets at home.
Yeah, we get great ones behind our house. We've got that little property drops down behind it. Time for the mosquitoes.
Oh, sorry. No, you're fine. No, you're fine. I'm just getting there. Bye. Thank you.
There it goes, sunset in Eustis.
It's about gone. Another couple minutes, it'll be gone, right?
Pretty fast.
Mine doesn't show it the color yet. As the sun slowly sinks in the west, they enter the ISBA.
The ISBA sinks into the sun, into the ocean.
Drop here real quickly.
Oh man, they got all the heavyweights here, huh?
But you know, it took a team to do that. And one guy to get all the year out. It takes a team. And I hope you remember. Because that's how you get a team.
For the camera.
I can do that.
Armed for battle, are we?
Nah.
Eustis should have just given up and said, let's call the meeting off. You know. Cal doesn't want to be seen, huh? That's Cal, so he's looking, he's trying to hide. Yeah. Okay. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
You're gonna raise some hell?
We're gonna listen a lot.
Yeah. How you doing, Robin?
Good. How are you? How are you today?
Wherever that granddaughter is.
Mark, how you doing? You guys gonna raise some hell? You gonna or cave and just give them what they want?
That's the plan.
That's the plan. Huh? Well, you guys gave up Deer Park years ago, so might as well give up this one. So Josh, they put you on this side of the table, huh?
I've been isolated.
Yeah, you're isolated with the staff, huh?